Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we're going to take a look at how accurate and precise and dead on do I actually need to be in woodworking. Sometimes the best woodworkers are machinists. They are used to getting things dead accurate, being to the nearest 1/10,000 of an inch in every aspect. But sometimes the worst woodworkers are machinists because you don't need to be that accurate all the time. So the question then comes, when do I need to be that precise and when does it really not matter? A lot of the time the problem comes from plans. It will dimension out a board and say this board needs to be 3/4 by 3 inches by 24 inches long. So we dutifully start working on our board and making it precisely the exact measurement. We take it down to exactly 3/4 by exactly 3 inch by exactly 24 inches long, when only one of those measurements might actually be valuable, or really none of them. The real skill in woodworking comes down to being able to look at the instructions and know this measurement is really important, and this measurement, you could fudge an inch and it really wouldn't change a thing. So let's take a look at the carcass I'm working on here. Now, this particular board, the dimensions would say it needs to be 3/4 by 4 inches by the length of the tenon. So you can see the tenon sticking out here from that end to this end. But none of those measurements actually matter. This board could be taller and it wouldn't matter. It would just mean that your skirt would be taller. It could be wider and it wouldn't matter. I have another 1/4 inch here to the leg that I could make the inside of this face move out another 1/4 inch before it runs into the drawer. This board does not need to be 3/4 inch long. And in this case, even the length doesn't matter because it's a through tenon. This tenon could stick out 3 inches. And it wouldn't matter other than the aesthetic difference of having a tenon sticking out that far. The actual measurements on this have absolutely nothing to do with the cut sheet. I can make it just about any size I want to make it. I can make it out of different size lumber, whatever I have on hand. The only things that are important are actually the size and shape of the tenon and the distance from shoulder to shoulder. In this case, the distance from this shoulder to this shoulder is very important because then my legs change, because then I'm interfacing with something else. And it's very, very important that the measurement from this shoulder to this shoulder be exactly the same as the measurement from this shoulder to this shoulder, or my box won't be square. When it comes to the tenon here, that really does matter because I need my mortise and my tenon to be exact, otherwise I have some gaps in there, and that just doesn't look so good. But if I make my tenon a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, it doesn't matter if I haven't cut the mortise. I can just cut the mortise to match the tenon. And in that case, I need to make sure the mortise is exact, but the tenon doesn't have to be exact. And there's a concept that really scares a lot of beginners. Whenever you're making a joint, you're connecting two pieces or more together. Whatever you do to the first piece doesn't matter. You can make the first piece just about whatever size you want. You just have to make sure that the second piece matches the first piece. And so in that mind, you don't have to worry about preciseness on your first set. You have to worry about preciseness on the second one when it fits into something that's existing. And there's the key you have to watch out for. Whenever one board has to fit perfectly into another board, that is when you have to be ultra precise. So when looking at the totality of a piece, I can have a lot of flexibility at the beginning. Even if the measurements say it has to be 24 inches long, if I make it 26 inches long, it doesn't matter because it's the first piece. I just make other things longer to match it. As long as I have enough lumber to do it, I am only constrained to the measurement of the lumber I have or the space in which the piece is intended to fit. It has to fit between doorways, well then you have to keep the measurement within those. And so as long as you are on the first piece, you can make it whatever size you want. Accuracy doesn't matter at all. Within realistic reasons, of course. The problem comes when you start to get further down the chain. If I've already made this board, well, I have to make sure this one matches it exactly. It's got to be dead on, within a shaving or so. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of square. But then we get to this stretcher. Well, this stretcher doesn't matter because I haven't made the other stretcher yet. But once I get to the second stretcher, I have to make sure it matches this one exactly. So now I have the stretchers in place. Now I can cut the tenons on the end. And it really doesn't matter how long they are. Now in this particular case, I have a through tenon and a through tenon, and I want to make sure that they don't run into each other. So I need to make sure that if I make this tenon, I still leave enough room for this tenon, but I can adjust this one a little ways. Once this one is set, well then this one has to be accurate to match the first tenon. So again, whichever one comes first, measurements don't matter. Whichever one comes second, you have to be more careful. Then I've got the tenons done, now I can create the mortises. And because I have the constraints of the box size and everything in here, now all of my mortises really have to be exact. And I need to spend a lot of time on that and make sure that everything fits well, because they have to fit in the constraint of this tenon and this tenon, and all 4 legs then have to fit together so I can still keep this thing square. So now I have the carcass, we have the skirts, we have the legs, I can make the top, and at this moment I can now determine exactly what the top needs to be. I want it to stick out 1 inch past my leg on all sides, so I could set my carcass on my top and then measure out exactly the size the top needs to be. Up until this point, I didn't know what the exact final dimensions of my carcass would be. Now yes, I could look at the plans and see what it should be, but I don't know what the reality is. I may have accidentally changed something. I may have broken something, in which case, oh, I need to shorten it a little bit so I can cut a new tenon. And that's perfectly fine because I haven't cut the top yet. But now that the carcass is done, now it's important that the top be really close to the right size. In this case, because I'm leaving about 1 inch overlap all the way around, yeah, the top can flex within 1/8 inch. It's really not going to make that big a difference visually. But I still want it to be relatively accurate so that it looks right on this. And that's why when I'm following a set of plans, and I have a cut list in there, I don't go through and cut all the pieces to the right size. Because once you do that, now you're constraining every piece in the project. And if you make a mistake, if something comes out wrong, if something isn't exactly the way it should be, well, now you've got a problem with all the pieces on your cut list that interfere with that one piece. So yeah, cut lists, don't do them all right at the beginning. You're going to run yourself into problems. So when I'm pulling lumber out of stock, I'm usually going to leave it several shavings too big in every dimension. And in length, I'm usually going to leave it 1/2 inch to 1 inch or 2 inches, or however much I can spare out of the board I want to cut it off. If I can leave an extra 6 inches on a board, I'm going to leave an extra 6 inches on the board because I might want that extra 6 inches later. So when working with rough stock, you want to make things bigger than they need to be. And in that case, accuracy really doesn't matter. As long as the number is larger than what's listed in the measurements, you should be okay. At that point, accuracy really doesn't matter. It's just got to be a bigger number. As you start going through the piece, accuracy becomes more and more important. If I'm working off of plans, usually the first piece I mark out, I'm going to use a tape measure. And a tape measure is going to get me usually within a 1/16 inch or less, because those are 1/16 inch marks. Now I could use a tape measure with 36th inch marks, but those are really hard to come off of because you have the thickness of the actual mark that's on it, and tape measures aren't accurate. They're ballpark close, but they'll get you roughly where you need to be, especially with your first few pieces. As we start moving down the piece and we start getting other things put in, accuracy becomes more and more important. And if it's very important that one piece match another piece exactly, I am not going to use a tape measure. This is not accurate enough for that. I need dead-on accuracy. In that case, I'm going to use the reality of the first piece and lay it on top of the second piece and use a marking knife, not a pencil, to precisely mark exactly how long one is onto the other. If for some reason I can't move the first piece onto the second piece and actually transfer it, then I'm going to use a story stick. A story stick is just some random scrap of lumber. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to lay it on, I'm going to butt up this end flush, and I'm going to use a marking knife and transfer the mark from this onto the story stick. Then I can take this over to my second piece, and I can use that same knife, put it into the mark, and then mark my other piece. And that's really, really accurate because I'm using a knife cut that will register this knife exactly where it needs to be into the next one. If I need to do a lot of those, story sticks are a great way to do it because once I lock this down, now this stick is precisely that length and I can actually mark off of it. A story stick is an incredibly accurate way of transferring a mark from one to another. Far, far more accurate than a tape measure will ever be because you're using a reality length as opposed to ink on a line. So in general, how accurate do you need to be? Well, it depends on the piece and where in the build you are. If you're early on in the build and it's the first piece, accuracy doesn't matter at all because you can adjust things as you go to fit the reality you created. But if you're coming down to the last piece and it has to interfere with 4 other pieces, yeah, accuracy is very important and you need to be dead on. A knife is a great... In those cases, you use a knife and not a pencil because the accuracy difference between them is astounding. Oftentimes, you have to look at what other things are going to be running into this piece. And particularly this stretcher, honestly, the only places where it's going to run into things are where it hits the legs on either end. I could give this an extra 1/8 inch in any dimension and not change a single thing. In that case, there's only one measurement that really matters on this board. Everything else, yeah, within a pencil length, not a problem at all. Lengthwise, shoulder to shoulder, there's where I've got to use the knife. So you've got to look at the whole project and see what will this piece be running into. The more things it runs into, the more locations where its measurements have to be accurate. And in different places, it doesn't matter. Some places, it's to the nearest whatever. Some places, it's the nearest 1/4 inch. Some places, it's the nearest 1/16. Some places, it's got to be dead on accurate. It can't have any movement, and in that case, you have to be a machinist. Make it really accurate. So as the saying goes, the machinist needs to be accurate to the closest 1/10,000th of an inch. Woodworker needs to be closest to the nearest 1/16th of an inch. The timber framer or carpenter needs to be accurate to the nearest 1/4 inch. The boat builder, now they need to be accurate to the nearest boat. The more you build, the more you realize the places where you need to be accurate and the places where it really doesn't matter. And especially if you go back and look at a lot of old furniture, you're going to find the inside surfaces are completely rough sawn or scrubbed out. And in that case, the accuracy doesn't matter. Give or take an extra 1/8 inch, doesn't matter at all. And so they just leave it rough. There's no reason to smooth it down. And you'll start to realize that there are places where that's important and some places where it's not. When you're first getting started, it can be difficult to know what those are, but if you start looking at what is it going to be running into, that will start to show you where you need to be accurate and where you really don't. Whenever you're looking at a set of plans, realize that they were drawn out by an engineer, which will give you all the measurements you need. But sometimes the measurements you need don't have to be accurate, they're just the guide. It needs to be this. And you can understand where things need to flex a little bit and where they really can't flex. I hope this answered a few questions, but I'm sure there are lots more. If you have particular instances or things you'd like me to look at, throw me a comment down below. I do read through all of them and I answer as many as I can, and that does actually help out the channel, so thank you for commenting. Anytime you comment, hit like, share, subscribe, all those things do help us and they keep us going. They help us grow the channel and get in front of more people, so thank you for that. That does mean a lot. If you'd like to take it one step farther and make it special, you can become a patron on Patreon. There are a bunch of people scrolling over here. They are patrons who are completely sponsoring us, and they are the ones who quite literally keep the lights on, as well as people who've clicked the little join button down below and become members here on YouTube. Between patrons and members, we are running because of you guys rather than someone else out there who wants to pay us to make it happen. You are the reason we are here, and I like that. So thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more about Patreon, there are links to that in the description down below, or you can click the little join button and become a member here on YouTube. On top of that, we have special perks for both, so you can see some of the behind the scenes and things that are going on. So I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This board is precisely 0.74896341 inches.